In the moment you are provoked, you are no longer living your own life. You are living inside someone else's intention, moving on a string they pulled with a single word. Most people never notice the exchange because it feels like reaction, but it is submission disguised as strength. The man who cannot be provoked has already won, because nothing outside him can command his mind. Kenji was not a weak man, but his days were filled with small defeats that left no bruises. A supervisor's tone, a stranger's impatience, a message read and ignored, a passing insult that lingered like smoke in his chest. He would remain outwardly polite, yet his mind would replay the scene for hours, sharpening arguments he would never speak. He called it having standards, but the truth was simpler. He was easy to move. One evening after a long day, a careless comment from a colleague turned into a quiet storm in his body. Kenji smiled, nodded, and went home, but the anger followed him through the door and into the night. He felt robbed of peace, yet the one who robbed him had already forgotten. In that stolen silence, he realized something humiliating. His calm depended on other people behaving well. Kenji found an old passage attributed to Miyamoto Musashi, a swordsman who lived where consequences were final and attention meant survival. Musashi did not write to comfort anyone. He wrote to strip weakness down to its bones. His precepts speak of not clinging, not being ruled by desire, and not surrendering oneself to the shifting opinions of others. Kenji read the words slowly and felt a sharp recognition, like seeing his own face in cold water. Musashi understood a simple law of conflict. The first person to lose control has already lost the advantage. Not because anger is always wrong, but because anger is noisy, and noise reveals your position. A provocation is a small blade. It tests whether you will expose your mind, whether you will chase, whether you will show your hunger to be seen as right. Kenji began to suspect that most arguments are not battles for truth, but traps for attention. In Zen, the mind is trained to witness what rises without becoming what rises. Thoughts appear like clouds, emotions surge like weather, and the discipline is to remain the sky. This is not numbness, it is clarity. A provocation is only powerful when it is welcomed inside and given a throne. Kenji learned to notice the first signal, the tightness in the throat, the heat behind the eyes, the urge to answer quickly. That urge felt like justice, but it was often fear dressed as righteousness, fear of being diminished, overlooked, or made small. Zen did not ask him to pretend he felt nothing. It asked him to see the feeling without obeying it. The gate was not mystical. It was simply the space between stimulus and response, guarded by breath. A week later, the test arrived in a familiar form. During a meeting, the same colleague made a remark, subtle enough to deny, but sharp enough to sting, and several people glanced toward Kenji to see what he would do. The old Kenji would have tightened his smile and later delivered a careful, pointed reply in private, keeping the wound alive. Instead, he felt the spark and did nothing with it. He lowered his eyes for a moment, not in surrender, but in discipline. He took one slow breath and let the heat move through him without turning it into a weapon. When he spoke, his voice was calm and plain, addressing only the task, not the insult hidden inside the words. The room shifted in a way he could feel but could not explain. The provocation had nowhere to land. Bushido is often spoken of as courage, but courage is not only the willingness to face danger, it is the refusal to be ruled by impulse. The warrior code valued composure because composure is strategic, and because it protects what cannot be replaced, the mind. A man who reacts on command is not free, even if his reaction is loud and convincing. He may call it pride, but pride that must be defended is a fragile thing. Kenji began to see the hidden battlefield in ordinary life. A cutting comment is an invitation to abandon your own center. A rude driver, a petty message, a mocking laugh. Each one asks the same question. Will you step out of your discipline to prove something to a stranger? The warrior does not win by overpowering every threat. He wins by refusing needless fights that drain his spirit and betray his purpose. Kenji did not try to become perfect. He built a system. He chose one non-negotiable action, He would never respond in the first 10 breaths after feeling provoked. 10 breaths was not a moral rule, it was a tactical delay. It broke the spell of immediacy, and it allowed his deeper mind to return before his mouth moved. He also removed fuel from his environment. He stopped rereading messages that carried a sting, because repetition is how provocation becomes identity. He stopped rehearsing speeches in his head, because mental arguments are training sessions for future anger. And when he needed to speak, he spoke briefly without decoration, like a clean cut that did not seek applause. Over time, people began to notice something unsettling about him. He was difficult to manipulate. The change was quiet, and that was the point. Kenji still felt irritation, still experienced disrespect, still noticed injustice, but his inner world no longer belonged to those moments. He discovered that most provocations are powerless when they meet a mind that does not bargain for approval. The more he practiced, the less he needed to prove, and the less he needed to prove, the stronger he became. This strength did not make him cold. It made him precise. He could choose when to confront and when to ignore, when to speak, and when to leave silence standing like a wall. He began to understand Musashi's harsh clarity. Detachment is not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to be owned by feeling. To be unprovoked is not to be passive. It is to be sovereign. It is to live from an inner command rather than external noise, to move according to principle rather than pressure. The world will always offer you hooks, and many of them will look like righteousness, pride, or courage, but they are often just invitations to lose yourself. If you want a single measure of inner strength, do not ask how hard you can strike. Ask how hard you can be struck without surrendering your mind. The man who cannot be provoked is not merely calm. He is free, and freedom is the quiet victory that comes before any visible win.